Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 227. I am delighted to welcome back onto the podcast Chris Bowman. Chris, how are we?
Good, Ben. Thanks for having me back. Pleasure to be on.
No problem, mate. We've been trying to get this one in for a little bit, but I'm intrigued because the last episode we did was actually March 2021. So we've had a
Yeah,
couple of years, and I know you've not been sat back relaxing in that sun over there. You've been grafting, so you've got plenty to update on. What I would say, Chris, is anyone that wants sort of backstory, I know you might cover it a little bit in this episode. Anyone wants like your full story, they can go back and listen to episode 127. What I'm interested in this one, give us a little bit of an update. So between then and now, what's been some of the big updates for you?
yeah. I think a couple of things really. I mean, obviously the business has organically grown and the team has grown now. So we've got five of us on board. We've just recruited a technical football coach as well, actually, who used to work at Southampton Academy and then one of the big academies out here as well. So he'll come on now from a one-to-one technical point of view. He's been working with us on and off for some time in the off season and obviously winter break in the World Cup, just to marry up the kind of the physical metrics that we want from a session with the sporting actions. And he's not a sports scientist by trade, but he's very receptive to all that and very on board with learning. So that's a nice synergy for us. We've branched out now into the tennis space. So not this one just gone, the one before. I was actually over there performance managing the world number 10 female player at the Australian Open. So that's great. We've got Moratoglu Academy that's Serena Williams is old coach. They're based here at Jumeirah Beach Hotel with us. So there's great synergy from that side. And then other athletes as well. We've had Johnny Sexton in the building, obviously Irish rugby captain. So it's been great to see the organic growth from a staff point of view, but also athletes, having people like Johnny in the building during the World Cup winter break, actually. And he was in the same, in the room at the same time as a couple of younger pros. Joe Gelhardt from Leeds was here at the time. And, just the kind of conversations that people can have in the room when you've got somebody so experienced like Johnny, who's, been the number one player in the world, effectively the Ballon d'Or winner of rugby. And he's in the same room, having a chat with a 20-year-old Premier League footballer who's trying to start their career at that point, and the kind of mindset lessons that can be taken from all that. I know off air we discussed kind of what do we want to center the podcast around, and one of the key things for me this year that I put together at the back end of last year is the pillars of performance talk, and that is very much centered around performance mindset, really. It was kind of a process where I had to reverse engineer like what makes all these different athletes tick, get them to performance, and the underpinning thing to all that I figured was psychology, actually. Like, the physical and tactical and technical can't be enhanced without the right psychology, and that's something now I'm really exploring for this year. In terms of how can we impact things, whether it's young footballers, whether it's people in our building doing rehab. How do we make them tick, and get the outcome.
What are some of them key lessons you take away straight away from speaking to someone like Johnny, who you mentioned? I know plenty of others that have been over there, but from other sports, is there anything that sort of stands out that we can learn and apply in football?
Yeah, I think accountability is one. I think something that stepping away from the game, and obviously players when they come and work with us here 9 times out of 10 are self-funding, really, and they're here on a holiday and they're taking accountability for their preparation and their career, right? So stepping away and working privately, and especially when it comes into the tennis, the athlete is the boss in the tennis. So they've got the power to hire or fire you at any given moment, right? And if they don't want to do something or they don't feel like it's beneficial to them, then obviously there's a conversation that takes place where us as the scientists in the room, we'll talk about load management, or we'll talk about the potential upside of it, or the risks of, I don't know, going out and, for example, a lot of the tennis players like to go out on court before they actually play, right? They like to do an hour's training immediately before competition, which is like, in our world, pretty baffling. We're thinking, well, we want to be fresh. We really want to be fresh. Why would you want to do that? But in their head, they're going, well, if I don't feel like I can hit the ball properly, or my serve's not quite on, then, I could be a set down within 30 minutes here. And then I'm on an uphill battle. So athlete accountability is definitely one of those things, which I feel like in a team sport environment, we actually, we breed a culture of making them not accountable in many ways, because it's very much a one size fits all kind of, this is our program today, lads. All 25 people who are individuals in their own right, pretty much sticking to the same process, right? Like they're doing the same lifts or same preventative exercises as a group, etc., etc. Whereas I think we can tailor it a bit more individualized in that. And also empower the athlete. What does make you feel the best on the pitch on a Saturday? Because that's what everyone wants, right? At the end of the day. So that's one thing I would say, and that's something that is prevalent with footballers when they come to us as well, because they'll go, listen, I want to work on X, Y, or Z, and then we start to explore why. Like, okay, have you had multiple hamstring injuries this season, and that's why you want to work on your hamstring strength, or your speed, or all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah,
I love that you mentioned that. I'm actually reading, I don't know if you've read Tim Grover's books, but I'm reading Winning at the moment, and he mentions exactly what you talked about there, doesn't he, about fitting in with the athletes. So we obviously had all your famous players, your Jordans, your Kobe's, and all the rest of them, and it's fascinating how he talked about, one, like you just mentioned, that the power of the player, if they didn't want to do something, it was their decision, but also that his role, that he knew times where he could step in and make an impact. So he had to see these little windows where it'd be like, right, I could suggest this here, we could do this here. And anyone that's not read it, I do recommend to go and read it, because it's a fascinating insight into the role we take with these individual athletes. But obviously theirs is still team sport, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we had a conversation recently out here, just internally in our team, about kind of, one of the biggest things I've always pushed is transparency, because I've sat on the other side of the fence, as the head of a department, or a physio within a club, and seen people, players working with independent practitioners, etc., which is very much seen as like a don't do it kind of thing. It's changing a little bit, but transparency is the key. And ultimately, as now sat here as the independent practitioner, being able to have good, honest communication with the decision makers at clubs is absolutely paramount to the whole process, and not believing that I've got all the right answers, because I certainly don't. Ultimately, I'll see a player for maybe 4 or 5 days over a week-long period. I've got a player coming out tomorrow. I've got 3 sessions with him in a week. So my job's just to keep him ticking over, maybe see 1 or 2 little things that might enhance his programming, but the club have got to be the ones that are pushing that program forward, because they see this guy 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day, every day. Whereas I feel like the independent practitioner kind of models took a bit of a bad name, because certain people probably like badmouth the clubs, or almost make them their enemies, really, when it needs to be the complete opposite. You need to work with these people, because the person who misses out is the player. And it was interesting what you said there about Tim Grover, because probably just after our last podcast, I was on one of the leaders in sports kind of online events. It was still kind of coming out of COVID. And it was the chap who was the head of performance at the LA Clippers. And he was basically saying how football, from that side of things, is so far behind your basketballs, etc. And he used the example of a young player, which I thought was great, because he kind of said, we've got an 18-year-old or whatever, really talented player. And what's the message that we always say to them? We always say, do extra. Like extra in the gym, extra prehab, get a soft tissue session, go and pay for a massage in your own time, do extra on your finishing with a coach or whatever it is. So we have this this message is what we say, because that's what it's going to take to get you a professional contract or get you to the top. Whereas then as soon as they hit a first team environment, we're so worried about their loads. So we just say, stop everything. You can't work with anyone apart from the people in this room. We've got the best expertise in this room, which may be the case, or it may not be the case, but you've still then got the same 18-year-old, really. You know, he might be 18 and 2 days old rather than 18 and 0 days old.
Mm.
So you've still got a player who's 18, his development window probably is still there till he's the age of 24, 25, really. And we're denying them the opportunity to try and better themselves, which is the only sport, he was saying, in the world where that happens. Because obviously in the NBA model, now basically he said every player has got inbuilt into their contract a budget where they can recruit their own staff. And his job as the performance manager is not to actually program and say you've got to do X, Y, and Z. It's to set the physical metrics, i.e. the body fat composition, your power scores, etc., etc. Maybe something around injury prevention if they've had previous injuries. And he says, right, you know, your guys, they'll have a meeting with the players' individual staff. This is what we are looking for. And if it's not delivered, then we've got the power to get rid of you, you know, but we trust you. He trusts you. You've got a relationship. Go away, execute, which is a very interesting thing. And that's how it is, you know, in, like I say, the tennis world or whatever, but maybe not so much rugby and football, but yeah, certainly in the tennis space, that's how it is.
The other thing I thought interesting was when he spoke about Jordan, if you really critiqued his approach from a scientific point of view and looked at load and all the rest of it, you'd be like, oh no, this is not the way to go, because he's doing so many things where you're like, be tearing your hair out if you're that bothered about all these individual aspects. But then it's potentially the greatest ever. So you're looking at it and that's deciding where to fit in that position, isn't it? That's why I find it really interesting. But it relates very well over to football, both for practitioners in clubs, but also practitioners that are working privately with players as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the message really from my side is just be as transparent as possible. Like if you're an independent practitioner, you know, be as transparent as possible. And even on the other side, you know, being there in the past, I would have been very apprehensive about it, because ultimately, you know, as the physio in the room, if someone gets injured and they're working with somebody else, then the finger's pointed at you from the club's point of view. So, you know, it's a bit of a problem, but ultimately, if somebody else can get the most out of that player, or if you've got a busy treatment room, for example, and they might be better having somebody externally come in and give them a 60-minute full soft tissue at their house, rather than, you know, a bit of a microwave rub because you've not got enough time. You know, what is the outcome we're all desiring, and let's put those strategies in place. Really, so it's interesting to see the difference. And it certainly, if I was to ever step back into the game, my approach would be completely different. Yeah, definitely. I'd be a lot more receptive to this side of things.
Yeah, 100%. With it in mind, like the different sports that you've worked in again, how different is it from a club's perspective in terms of their approach to players coming working with someone like yourself? So like a Johnny Sexton or all these other athletes that you've had coming working from your mainly team sports, because I know individuals can be a little bit different. What's the sort of reception from rugby and other sports from a club point of view? Is it very different to football?
I don't think it's particularly drastically different. I mean, when they've come out to us from rugby or they've come out to us from football, ultimately there's always been a conversation with the club or with the physio staff, and everyone's pretty clear in terms of, you know, first thing I'm asking really is, what do you want from me? I've got this player, he's contacted me, like he's injured or he's not injured. Like, what is there anything I need to know from your side, or what can we deliver for you in this period of time? I'm happy to program, but also you're with him every day, and that's the same conversation. I think if you start the conversation with that, then it helps that buy-in straight away, because the trust is there. They know that something's, you're not going to try and reinvent the wheel or do something potentially harmful to the player or the athlete at that point. So the one thing I would say about Johnny is obviously, he's 37 now, going into probably his final World Cup, and he knows his body inside and out, and he'll tell you like, nah, don't do that, mate. It doesn't work for me, and this, that, and the other. And I think, going back to what we're saying there about young players and empowerment, we actually probably do that with older players at clubs. We kind of say, listen, you've been around the bush, you know your body, and if you tell me like, I don't lift weights anymore, I do this instead, and I do my yoga, my Pilates, whatever, then we just accept it with older players. Whereas with younger players, we don't necessarily have that same level of acceptance, I don't think. I think we kind of try and go, no, you need to do it this way. This is like the right method. Because that's what we've effectively been taught, right? But yeah, I think, like I said, it's not one size fits all with all these people. And that's pretty crucial, I think, to get we're always dealing with the 1%, right? Or the small margins is what we're trying to get out of these guys. And how do we do that? And I think it's by being a bit more individualized.
Yeah, you definitely see a craving of that from players at the moment. And probably that is partly in education as well, isn't it? That players have learned more about the benefits of doing the extras. And it's really interesting you say about that mindset, because it's so true, isn't it? From academy to first team, and it's hammered home throughout academy ages at a number of different clubs as well, doing extras, especially on the technical side. And then all of a sudden you've got to stop, and it's got to be the focused work purely under control. So no, it's really interesting. Back to you mentioned about the pillars of performance, Chris. Is this something that's going to be the foundation of your programming? You've sort of mentioned there about the 1%ers. Is this give you the real structure for players coming in to see you? Is that the reason behind it?
Not necessarily for the players coming in to see us, but you asked about kind of where we are now compared to where we were 2 years ago. And we're actually about 60 days or so away from opening our own rehab and performance facility here in Dubai. We've got some nice backing with the UAE FA, like links into there and stuff. So we work with a number of the players from a performance management side in the Arabian Gulf League anyway. So we're looking to, develop that out. We've got good links into a lot of the youth academies out here as well. So, and a lot of those guys are looking at kind of scholarships in the States or maybe roads into the professional game. So something we've just launched recently is elite football performance, but also alongside that, I've got a running specialist with us. So we'll have elite running performance. Like I mentioned there, we've got the tennis, so elite tennis performance, and working alongside the likes of Moratoglu Academy and stuff with that. So the general kind of ethos will come under this kind of pillars of performance. So like I mentioned about this chap coming on board with us, technical and tactical will be his kind of domain. And then the physical will be myself and the rest of the team. And then obviously the thing that underpins that is kind of habit formation and psychology and the kind of the smaller details of nutrition, etc. So we want to create within our facility like a 360 approach to all aspects of training and performance. People who come in, they've got the physio downstairs, we've got the ice baths in there, we've got the Normatec recovery, we've got the yoga Pilates going off, the gym's upstairs, which is got everything you need from a performance point of view. And then they come downstairs, there's a little cafe there so they can refuel properly. And one thing I'm getting all the clients on at the moment is kind of the Whoop and trying to educate them about sleep habits. And young guys, they're on the PlayStations all night normally, aren't they? So they're coming in and not necessarily the best levels of recovery. And then we're saying, well, how do you think you're going to perform at the weekend? Or how are you going to maximize your training this week when you're on 5 hours kip every night, So yeah, that's kind of what the pillars of performance will aim to do, is just kind of educate and empower around all those different areas, which will become the sub-brands of elite sports performance as well. So yeah, that's kind of the direction we're trying to take things in. Yeah.
Mate, it's massive and absolutely quality to see the progression over there as well. And that's why I was really excited to get you back on so we could talk about like where things have gone in only 2 years really as well. There's been big progress, hasn't there? But what about looking forward as well? Obviously with the facility, the additions of staff, what's like the next step? Is there anything that you can sort that you've thought about or anything that you where you want to go with it? Because there's a lot going on now, isn't there? Like where do you take it next?
Yeah, 100%. And I think certainly in this region as well, obviously you've seen Ronaldo go over to Saudi, and all the talk in this region is actually that the Saudi Pro League is going to go big in the next window for sure. They're going to look at pretty much a marquee player in every team. So this region is certainly becoming a bit of a hotbed for players interested to come over, not necessarily here yet. But the other thing that we're working on at the moment is a little bit of consultancy around that as well. So I was recently in a club in the UAE and kind of assessing like their gym and their setups and their structures and the systems that they've got, and they're not what we would experience really in terms of the UK. And this particular club have got a number of injuries at this moment in time, so I'm just working with them at the moment to think I'm potentially going to go in for a couple of months just to put those systems in place to try and educate and avoid these problems happening again, recurrent ACL injuries or bad hamstrings that are happening and stuff like that. So I think that's a space where we can take things to from our side. Now, whether that then means we're kind of distance managing, or whether we become a St. George's Park kind of model for the league here. But I think that's kind of going to be the direction we're ending in. Yeah.
Brilliant, mate. That's quality. I wanted to ask as well about you and your role, because obviously with this progression of the business, even from when we spoke last time of the transition from you being at a club to being business owner to running everything that you were running before, and now this extra step and going again, how have things changed for you? Like, how do you see your role? How's it developed?
Yeah. To be honest, I'm a very like hands-on guy, right? Like I want to be involved in this and that and the other. And the biggest thing that I would say is like you've got to step back from working in the business to working on the business. That's something I've certainly not nailed at this moment in time, but it's something that I'm learning. And definitely, in 60 days' time when those doors open, I'm gonna have to be that kind of more managerial role, as opposed to seeing every single client that comes through the doors. So yeah, I'm migrating into that now, which is why the kind of sub brands of the business are a good move for us, because it means that the football performance department can be headed up by Sam, the long-term athletic development can be headed up by Jamie, who works with us. We've got Chris, who's our running coach. He can run the running side of things. We'll recruit again imminently, to be honest, for more physios and coaches that can work from this new facility within those other sub brands as well. And then I guess the way I see it is that I kind of pull all those together and make sure that our philosophies are right, and then and go from there really. One thing we're looking at doing as well at the moment is a sports medicine and performance conference at the end of the year, with an existing fitness conference, so it'd be like an add-on to that. So it'd be great for us as a brand to kind of spearhead that. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but it's going to mean that I'm not necessarily in doing treatments every single minute of every day. I'm more kind of making sure, right, this guy, you're sorted. You've got your gym session program with Jamie, and you've got your treatment in there with this therapist, and we're all kind of aligned within the building.
It's great to see that scale and hear the coaches that are involved. Have you found it hard to do that though, in terms of delegation and being a practitioner at heart as well, like wanting to be involved? Has that been quite hard?
Yeah, it has, but I think also it comes down to kind of trust and making sure that the people you bring in are aligned with your values,
Yeah,
and not, like I talked about there, reinventing the wheel. And even, you know, referrals we get through. If a club trusts me with what I'm going to deliver, then it's an easy. I'm just an extension of their team, really. And then, everybody who's in the building here with us needs to also understand that how we operate is very much on, a data-driven, science-backed approach. We're not reinventing the wheel necessarily. We're doing the basics well first and foremost, and then there might be, other things that can come into play at that point. But I've just done a session this morning with a player from the Indian Super League returning from injury, and we're making sure that that's GPS, that the data goes back to his club, that the loads are right. What load are we then putting into him tomorrow? Working with Sam this afternoon to design the session for that based on what we've done today and what metrics we need to hit. So, there's a technical element to the rehab session, but it's done properly. It's not just kind of kamikaze, let's just go and boot footballs around all day, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I would say, is that your recruitment is key. If you get the right people in the building, it's easy to do. And again, you need people that are willing to challenge you, I think, and have those conversations and say, oh no, like, can we improve this, can we improve that? But
yeah.
also, on the flip side of that, they're also willing to learn and develop and work with the other members of the team on certain things. So yeah, probably the biggest lesson I've learned, actually, recruitment, I would say.
And would you think alongside that, because obviously there'd be coaches listening that not necessarily in a private setting, but certainly at clubs that will be hiring or even go into interviews as well, is the big part you feel that the coaches you've got are on board because of the vision, because you've got the vision that's set and you can talk to them about what's to come?
Maybe a little bit of that, maybe a bit of that. But I mean, we've got some internal staff pillars that or like business pillars that we try and stick to, and one of those is impact. And we had a conversation this morning about some stuff, and one of the guys was like, "Yeah, but what if they want to do more technical or than physical, but our testing is showing that they need to do more physical work than technical work because you're quite happy with them technically, and this, that, and the other." And I said, listen, like, ultimately, what impact are we going to make? Because that's one of our 5 pillars of the business, is impact. So we need to be prepared to kind of let that client walk away if they're not willing to be on board with what we're saying. We're sat here as the specialists in the room, and we're data driven, telling them that physically is where your weaknesses are right now in terms of your performance, not necessarily technically. So we need to, weight your package into your physical development. And if they just want to go and do technical stuff all the time, then just say, well, go and do that in the academy. Then go
Yeah.
back to your academy, because you're not here for that. You're here to get better as an athlete all round, 360 holistically. And as long as we all kind of come back into that, then we kind of can all look ourselves in the mirror and we're all right with that. So yeah, that hopefully that answers the question, really.
Yeah, no, it does, and I suppose that's that line between giving the player that empowerment behind them, isn't it? But also pulling on your expertise as well. There's got to be somewhere in the middle, hasn't there?
Yeah, correct. Exactly. And we're not, in that scenario, we're not saying we're not going to do any technical. We're just saying, if you want us to improve you, our data shows that this is where you're going to improve. So we're just going to
Yeah,
weight your package slightly that way. But if you're coming to us saying, listen, I want to do 15 sessions on the grass with Sam, doing all my technical skills and finding the top bins or whatever, then but we're saying, well, you can do that already. We
yeah.
know you can do that, but what you can't do is get up and down the pitch, and you've got a terrible
Mhm.
injury history. So how about we work on that so that you can perform to your maximum doing that? Um, that's the kind of education process. So there is an empowerment to the athlete or the client, yes, but also you've got to have those conversations with them and say, listen, like, we're looking to maximize you here. It's not for us. We can happily sit back and just let you do that. But yeah.
Brilliant, mate. We did the quick fire questions in the last episode, but what I wanted to do in this is I wanted to do them but slightly different.
Okay.
So I've not sent you these, so yeah, I don't know if you remember them or not. But I'm just going to throw them at
I
you
have
and
no
see
idea.
what happens. The first one I always ask is around influences. So, what's some of the biggest influences on your career? But I'm going to switch it a little bit into business. So, in terms of influences on the business, both short term, what you've done already and where the business is at right now, but also long term, there must be influences on you, maybe not even within sport, that you sort of look out to and get influenced by. So who are that? Who are they, or what are they?
Reading is probably the biggest one in terms of influencing business mindset, etc., and something I've read a large amount around at the minute. And kind of key books, I guess, that would be go-tos would be The Power of Focus. I don't know the author of that one, but that's a really, really good book, and talks a lot about relationships actually, and kind of positive and negative relationships, and makes you kind of reflect on those and what went well and what didn't go so well, and maybe we need to do more of the things that went well within those. Tim Grover's somebody you mentioned there. Relentless is a great book to kind of understand athlete mindset, but I also think that correlates with business mindset as well, actually. And then Atomic Habits by James Clear is a brilliant book as well, just about kind of understanding habit formation and why you choose everything in your day. Why do you choose X, Y, or Z thing to do, or to eat, or to exercise, or not exercise? Atomic Habits is great at that. And The Chimp Paradox, Steve Peters, great book.
Yeah, plus some good recommendations there. In terms, we've talked about the skills for you as this business develops. If you could pick one out where you'd be like, right, that is a really key skill that not only have I developed already, but I know that I need to develop further. In your role, what would it be?
I think honesty and integrity is essential. Just having honest conversations, whether that's with staff, clients, athletes, whatever it is. Don't think you can get away from that. And then integrity in terms of making sure you don't go outside of what you generally believe in. So like I say there, our approach is very data driven, very science backed. We believe in that, so they're the pillars we always fall back on. Are we making improvement? Are we not? If we're not making improvement, maybe we need to try a slightly different approach to this person. Or if we are making improvement, then why do we need to reinvent the wheel? Let's just keep going with that, because it's obviously working. Yeah.
Brilliant. In terms of advice, so if Chris now was able to speak to Chris when the business very first started, and you could give him some advice, what would it be on a career or business focus?
What a question. I would actually say probably to make sure you're enjoying every moment of it. Like, you can get so wrapped up with being so busy and so on the front foot, but then you look back. I use the off season for example. So the off season, we had 55 days continuous outside, 40 degrees, 70 odd players came through the doors. It was full throttle. It was intense, and it's only when you kind of sit back after a few days, have a coffee, me and the lads or whatever who work with me, and we go, that was graft, wasn't it? But how good was that session? This session, we had this player in, that player in, and it shouldn't take for that to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should every single day have that reflective process, for sure. So yeah, I would say you can get really caught up in it, but make sure you're enjoying the moments, really. I even had a conversation recently with some of the lads about getting around to some weird and wonderful parts of the world that we've never been. We've got players in Tel Aviv, we've got players in Rome and stuff like that who we've worked with, and we're not always going to have those opportunities to go and have these experiences. Ultimately, sport and football is something we're all incredibly passionate about, and we've one lad has got kids, but most of us don't have kids and stuff here, so we need to go and experience games and these fantastic environments that our athletes are working in, because if we don't, then I certainly would say that that's the case with the Australian Open. There's one thing that happened last year is that I didn't enjoy it to the same level as I should have done by being there. Like, because I was in work mode every single day, I was just full throttle, like, right, what's next, rather than like, I'm at one of the biggest events in the world here. Like, take it in, enjoy it, Sat there.
It's always hard at the
gym.
time, isn't it? When you're, like you say, when you're stuck in business mode, and
it
is tough, that as well.
Yeah, but that's the same, isn't it, when you're in sport, I guess, when I look back in the time I worked in football, and it takes you to come out to look back and go, all the lads always ask me when they're out here, do you miss it? And you do. Like, there's nothing that can compete to a Saturday 3:00. Nothing at all can compete to that. The actual day-to-day of what we do here in clinic is very similar, because it's rehabilitation, performance-based training. We've always got athletes in the building, so that's very, very similar. But that you can't take that experience of a 3 p.m. Saturday, and especially R5 if you've won as well. You definitely can't beat that.
100%. Mate, final one. In terms of CPD for you, continued learning, but also just continually sharpening the sword and making sure that you're staying at the top of what you're doing. What's your approach to that now?
I mean, again, going back to those business kind of mantras, one of ours is be innovators, not survivors. So yeah, I mean, one of the things we're looking at the moment is with a chap called Andy Barr, who works over in the States actually now. He used to be at City. So he's invented a bit of kit, a bit like the Core X system, but his own, called the Q bands. So Andy was actually here last week. Had a good conversation with him, and we're going to kind of be a bit of a flagship for that system here in the Middle East, in terms of not just using it for our own purpose, with which it is great, especially a lot of rotational sports and stuff, your tennises and your golf and stuff like that, basketball. But going out there and actually, the position we're going to get to is where I'm kind of like the Middle East master trainer, and then educate other coaches throughout the region on this system. And that might involve some of this consultancy stuff of going in and teaching as well. So slightly different, but also very similar, I guess. We're just looking for, what's the next thing out there that's being used. This is being used at the minute, in the NBA, and Andy's using it a lot with the Brooklyn Nets. How can we now use that to develop our practice, whether that's in rehab or preventative kind of medicine?
Quality, mate. Absolutely brilliant to catch up. I know you probably skimmed the surface of a lot of stuff that's actually going on over there. I know it's hard on a podcast like this, but it's great to hear things are going so well and things are progressing. I can't wait to see the new facility when you get that open, and buzzing for you with that as well. Chris, in terms of links, contacts, like websites, where would you direct people just to keep up to date with what's going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of our stuff is pushed out there via Instagram. So my personal Instagram is Chris_EliteDXB. Business Instagram is Elite Sports Performance _DXB. And then we've recently just launched the tennis one and the football one as well, which you'll find off the main Elite Sports Performance link, and we'll be putting the running one up there as well. So each one of those will, like I say, have those own kind of sub brands. And if you're a lover of football, then there'll be football based information that goes on there. If you're more down the tennis route or the running route, then it'll be on those platforms.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of insights into the new place when it opens.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly that.
Quality,
Awesome.
mate. Well, thank you very much for your time, Chris. That's been quality to catch up.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers for having me on, mate, and catch you back when I'm in the Northwest.
Definitely.
Take care, mate.